Okay, you are live, Chair Veros.
Thank you, Christina. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City Finance Committee meeting of March 1st, 2022. I'm calling the meeting to order at 4:05 p.m. Christina, please go ahead and read meeting procedures.
Thank you. Assembly Bill 361 suspends certain provisions of the Brown Act, allowing public meetings like this one to be held by teleconference to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. At this time, I will conduct roll, and I would ask the chair to recognize me afterward to confirm certain matters for the record. Vice Chair Zafar.
Here.
And Chair Veros.
Here.
Thank you. Based on the responses to roll call, the record should reflect that all committee members can hear the proceedings clearly. If there are no objections, the record will further reflect that each committee member believes, based on voice or facial recognition or otherwise, that the persons representing themselves to be committee members are in fact committee members. Seeing no objections. Thank you. Seeing no objection, I will turn the meeting back over to the chair. A reminder that all votes must be taken by roll call.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, we are going to item number 2, new business. Item 2.1, mid-year 2021-2022 financial review for March 2022 by our Administrative Service Director, Kelly Sessions, and Finance Division Manager, Candace Daniels.
Thank you, Chair Veros and Vice Chair Zafar. Good to be here today. We are going to review the mid-year financial statements or financial position of the city. And so in order to get that started, I think I will do a screen share. And there we go.
I like the picture. Is that a dollar bills or?
I hope you like the graphics. They're colorful and helpful.
I did increasing.
So here we are with the Finance Committee. It is Tuesday, March the 1st, and I will advance the slide. So let's first take a look at what the presentation will look like, and I'm gonna slide over to here so we have a better look. Okay. First of all, we'll talk about a few key highlights of this report. You do have a written report that was submitted with the agenda, and so we'll just review the slide presentation today. We'll look at key highlights, then we'll take a general overview of the financial report, including an economic outlook of just what the economy looks like at this point. And then we'll look at the fiscal year 2022, so current fiscal year projected year-end results. We do have some recommended adjustments to the budget to finish out this fiscal year. We'll take a brief look forward to next fiscal year, what the budget will look like, and then we'll draw some conclusions from there. If either of you have any questions, feel free to jump in and we'll try to answer those as we go. So, key highlights. First of all, the city has experienced some recovery from the severe revenue losses that came about because of the COVID-19 crisis. Sales tax, for instance, is one area where we are pleasantly surprised. We'll get into that in a little bit. General policy reserves. We began the year at 19.2 million. We are projected to be at 20.9 million at the end of the fiscal year. That is before we look at the supplemental appropriations for the mid-year budget. And so we are projected to be $1.7 million, or to have a $1.7 million increase to fund balance. So that is very good news. On the revenue side, for general funds, we are projected to come in 1.6 million below our budgeted revenues. That shortfall is partially offset by the general fund expenditures, where we're projected to come in $1.2 million below budgeted levels. We'll again dive a little deeper into that here in a few minutes. In terms of transfers in and transfers out of the general fund, we are planning to do $9.3 million of transfers into the general fund. That includes the $4.05 million that we're getting from our ARPA fund this year. That $4.05 million is the second half of the total $8.1 million that we were to receive from federal grant funding to make up for our revenue shortfall caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. That $9.3 million will be offset by transfers out of $7.2 million. So our projected net transfers will be transfers in of $2.1 million. So mid-year review, let's take a look at the economic outlook. Or the overview. So this report is intended to provide a mid-year look at the financial condition of the city. We're going to review actual results up through December of 2021. So that's halfway through the fiscal year, 6 months into the fiscal year. In order to do so, we receive a lot of input from the city departments as to where they expect to end the year. And then we put in estimates where they are needed, appropriation estimates for the budget at the end of the fiscal year. In terms of the California state government, the state is actually making a very strong recovery from the pandemic. The governor's fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget projects a surplus of $45.7 billion. And that also includes funding to aid families during the pandemic. Because of this big surplus in state funding, the city does not anticipate any negative impacts on city resources. Now we'll take a look at just the economic outlook. What is out there in the environment?
Sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
On the previous slide, as state is, let's go to the previous slide. Sorry. Okay, there. So as state is making strong recovery from pandemic, right? So when we say it won't be having, cities don't have any negative impact or, so what are the possibilities that the cities could have negative impacts when the state goes into negative?
Yeah, so this may be a little bit before your time on council, but years ago, the state had a very bad habit of reaching out to cities to balance its own state budget funding problems. So there were all kinds of maneuvers happening at the state level to move different types of revenue sources around to benefit the state. So there were all a lot of state takeaways of revenues that cities had historically counted on. In order to help stop that from happening, I want to say it's Joe, you may remember this. I think it's SB1. Does that sound right? Anyways, there was a bill passed years ago to help protect state revenues, or maybe it's ACA1. Anyways, that bill went to the California voters who passed it overwhelmingly to prevent the state from raiding city coffers in order to balance their own budget. Since then, cities have been much more protected from state raids on city funding, but that's what this bullet refers to. The state having this tendency to look to cities to fix its budget problems, and we just don't anticipate that this fiscal year.
Sounds good. So as it's good that state is doing good, right? But because it's doing good, for example, from federal state, we got ARPA fund. Is there anything that we are going to benefit from when state is doing this surplus of 45.7 million? Any grants, any help to the cities?
Yeah, nothing that I am aware of that would come directly to cities. To the extent that, you know, if the state is able to assist families with funding various programs and providing help to families that lifts families up and out of the pandemic or out of poverty, then certainly the city would benefit from that sort of a thing. Just, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. But nothing that I'm aware of that would come directly to cities.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Like school free lunch programs or some other state level programs that they are running, which is helping the families. I think that's going to help us. Okay.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Thank you.
So I have
Okay.
a question around that too. I think I saw somewhere that, I mean, some of the things that that surplus might be used for is homelessness, but some of it might also be for climate action and climate, you know, related things. So there might be opportunities that, you know, for installation of, for example, what are these? The charging stations for EV cars and for solar panels to upgrade city buildings to maybe, you know, be more carbon friendly. So there might be money coming for some of those initiatives, and perhaps for us to keep an eye out for that, and maybe work with Rebecca's office or assembly members or Steve Glazer's office to see if there are opportunities that can benefit the cities as well from that surplus.
I'll just jump in here real quick. The council members, so far as right, for the purposes of our mid-year and for the purposes of our budget, excuse me, this is a good thing that the state, there's no negative impacts, but the state does have an earmark process, if you will, in which we can apply for grants and we can apply for funding through our senator and assembly member. For instance, we, I believe, received a certain amount of money for our Crow Canyon Road overpass to go with the Iron Horse Trail overpass for the initial, I think, design. So every year, generally, the assembly or the Senate will reach out and say, is there anything that we would like to, and we'll put in our wish list, if you will, for these different things. And there's opportunities to get those. That really isn't formulated for the purpose of the mid-year budget or our annual budget as worked into our budget process. It's more that we're made aware of this, and then we put in grants, apply for grants, or apply for funding for different projects as necessary.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also sure this is too soon because it's all just coming out.
Yeah.
But I also heard transportation dollars, so maybe something for a bike plan to accelerate some of that. Just I understand, you know, won't be part of this, but I think
Yes.
the money's there, and you know, when the state takes, the state also must gift. So
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
So the our transportation staff are reviewing all of that. And we do know there's a significant amount of transportation dollars that are going to become available here in the upcoming months. And we'll be looking at all the opportunities San Ramon can apply for during that time.
thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Joe.
Hey, thank you. So, did I skip one?
We are on.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so as of December of 2021, some key economic indicators were showing improvement and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, as the US economy grew 2.3% in the third quarter of 21, and also 6.9% in the fourth quarter of 21. The economy increased 5.7% for all of 2021 compared to 2020. Those are really huge numbers. You know, a good year is in the 2 to 3% range, and this is just almost off the charts. So we made a lot of progress in recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported 199,000 new jobs were added in December of 2021, but that was much lower than what was predicted. So overall, the US employment level is still 2.9% less than it was before the pandemic. Here's some of those unemployment rates, comparing December 2021 versus December of 2020. The national average currently 3.9%, a year ago, 6.7%. In California, unemployment was 5% in December and 9.1% a year ago. Unemployment in Contra Costa County, 4.2% December versus a year ago, 7.7%. And here in San Ramon, we're a little bit upside down, 2.8% in December versus 2.2% a year ago. But still, those are the San Ramon numbers, as you can tell, are much lower than any other average.
Oh, within county itself is double almost.
Right, right. Okay, so the economic outlook in terms of US housing construction soared 15.6% in 2021, mostly driven because of low mortgage rates that continued to support the housing market. Incredibly, housing prices grew by a record 16.9% over 2020. So add a lot to the equity in your homes. That trend, however, is not expected to continue. We're thinking that it's going to slow down somewhat in 2022 due to mortgage rate increases. And now with this Ukrainian war crisis, who knows what the future holds. California's median home prices increased 11% compared to December 2020, and the home prices are projected to rise, but at a slower pace. Existing single-family homes decreased by 15.7% from 2020.
But in Bay Area, I think the home prices grew by 50%, at least in 2020.
Yes, Bay Area tends to outpace the rest of the nation when it comes to housing price valuation.
Sales may have decreased because there was no inventory, or I don't.
Yeah,
Well,
least,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, at least from the transfer tax that I see that decreased the dollar amount. So that says that I don't know, maybe is it because the decrease in inventory, the number of sales decreased? Yeah.
Yeah, and what we're looking at here is median home prices. So the median point increased by 11% over a year ago. And that median point is still projected to rise, but at a slower pace. I'm not quite sure here why existing single-family home sales decreased by 15.7%.
Do we also look at the stock market and how that might be impacting overall?
We don't take that into consideration. If that's something that you wanted, we could certainly take a look at that, but that's really a kind of a beyond the scope of what we do here.
Yeah, my thinking is that, right, with the rising stock, people who invest in the stock market, and with the stock market being historically high, that people also had, those that were liquidating it, the ability to buy more. Whereas when it goes down now, the ability, that does impact the economy. I don't know exactly how, you're the expert here, but I was just wondering if that plays a role in the overall, economic outlook as we look at it.
Yeah, one thing from at least what I looked at is because of the inventory shortage, that was the biggest problem for home sales, and that's spiked the price for homes. So this is like a two side, right? One side is the inventory is decreased. That means existing single family home sale decreased. And then on the other side, the homes prices increased at the record. So that's
Yes, it's kind of a two-edged sword.
yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at what our fiscal year-end projected results will be in the general fund. We're looking here at revenue results. This brownish column represents actuals. The bluish column represents our projected estimates. So the first 6 months of last fiscal year was 19.1 million compared to 22.1 million of the first 6 months in the current fiscal year. Then here are the projected numbers at year end. Last year, 47.2 million in general fund revenues. We are projected to end the year with 53.3 million general fund revenues against a budget of against the budget of 55.0 million. So we'll dig into these numbers just a little bit. Again, revenue at mid-year. The current fiscal year revenue is 22.1 million. This is basically what we just talked about, but that is 3.1 million or 16% higher compared to the first 6 months of last year. And this is, we experienced real increases in property tax, property transfer tax, transient occupancy tax, licenses and permits, charges for service, and miscellaneous revenue. Compared to last fiscal year, the first six months, there's a decrease in sales and use tax. As I mentioned earlier, that is expected to go up, and we'll see those numbers here in a minute. And, it's not picking up the numbers. I see the numbers on my page, but I don't see the numbers on the screen, so I'm not sure what's going on here. Let me see something. Nope. Okay. Well, this column here represents property tax. Basically the numbers that, again, we just reviewed. So property tax actuals from last fiscal year versus actuals estimates of the, or actuals of the current fiscal year. We'll just skip over this since there's no numbers here. It's hard to understand.
So is this orange is, I think that orange seems to be 21, 22, and the blue is 2021.
So this is up through December. So this is the first 6 months.
Oh, only 6 months. Okay.
Yeah. And so the blue would be 2020, December of 2020, and the orange would be December of 2021. You can't see, there's no numbers on your screen, correct?
Yeah, but I have your the chart that you posted, right? So I'm just looking at that number.
Yeah, that is really strange. I don't know why it's not pulling up the numbers, but okay, let's go to the next slide. So general fund revenue estimates for the full year, we're projecting 53.3 million general fund revenue at the end of the fiscal year. That is 1.6 million or 3% below the adopted budget, but still a 13.1% increase over last year's actuals. This one has numbers.
Okay.
So this is basically the same bar chart that we were just looking at, except for the full fiscal year. And this is 21-22 estimates versus 21-22 budget. So you'll see here, property tax is just slightly below budget. Sales tax is projected to end the year slightly above budget. TOT quite a bit below budget. We'll talk about each of these numbers in a minute. Franchise tax is a little bit below budget. Charges for service, another $500,000 below budget. Licenses and permits is slightly above budget, and miscellaneous revenue slightly below budget. So property tax, the full year estimate is 22.8 million. That is 200,000 under budget, 0.9 million above the prior year actuals. So an increase of 4.1% over what we received last year. And we also experienced a 6.5% increase in assessed property values per the county assessor's office. This increase here of 6.5% doesn't translate exactly into new revenues because of Proposition 13 limits. But as homes sell, they turn over, then those new assessed values get baked into the property tax that the city receives.
So why do you think we came in below budget?
I think we expected the recovery to just be a little bit more robust when we passed the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year. A little bit more robust than what we've actually experienced. We're just now coming out of the pandemic, and
did we factor in more turnover or?
No, I think we just factored in higher values than what were there. And actually, I think it also included some new properties that were supposed to be coming online that are not coming in as quickly as we expected.
Got it.
And also, I think this Omicron definitely hit us with the TOT, right? The TOT, we were looking at almost half. We lost half.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a minute.
Omicron is definitely played.
Yeah. So sales tax, the full year estimate is 11.1 million. That's 3.3 million above budget and 0.3 million above the prior year actuals. Now the city this is kind of the one area that we do not forecast. We get our forecast from a consultant, Hinderleiter Delamas and Associates, and it's a complex system that they use. Receipts and reporting of sales tax revenue lags by several months because businesses collect the sales tax, they have to submit it, and so there's this big lag between reporting time and where you actually end up. So the current results are for the quarter year, or the quarter ending in September, and the actual results for the quarter ending in December will become available sometime in middle of March. So once we get those new numbers, we can update and make sure that we're still on track on the sales tax piece.
These are great numbers considering we haven't factored in the holiday season. So
yeah, let's hope that the holiday season exceeds our expectations. Okay, and as Chair Barros was mentioning, transient occupancy tax, we took a pretty big hit here. Again, we expected the pandemic, I think, to end sooner than it did. And it still is ongoing. So our year-end estimate is 1.5 million. That is a full 900,000 below what our budget is, and 700, but still 700,000 above what we received last fiscal year. As you know, the sales tax is based on room rates, and beds in, or heads in beds, as the saying goes. So the more people that stay overnight at a hotel and the more revenue we collect. One thing that we have been concerned about as a city is the fact that San Ramon, for its TOT tax, is more of a kind of a business type of destination. And so with all the Zoom and the ability to work from home and to hold meetings remotely, that we're just not sure at this point how much that will impact our TOT. And so part of this is, just an experiment to see how that goes. Franchise fees. Our full year estimate is 5.5 million. That is $500,000 below budget, and 0.08 million, 1.5% above last year's actuals. The thing that impacts the franchise fee is annexations and rates. And we're hoping that there would be more recovery in franchise fees, but business closures and a reduction in commercial waste hauling from COVID-19 appear to continue to affect our revenue receipts in this area.
So what about that annexation? Is it sorry, was just, okay, there. So when we say annexations, is it like the new developments that happened that we annexed? Is that
exactly as those developments, they're annexed in, the properties become habited, then all of those residences need trash haul service, and so that impacts and can significantly increase the franchise fee revenue that we receive.
Oh, okay, good. But then because we provided some relief to our ACI like 6 months back, so I forgot. So we did some provide some relief in order to adjust their fee, right? Not to increase the fee for residents. That's where we lost some of the revenue in this with ACI.
Correct. Yeah, that exactly lowered our revenue estimate partly because of that. So yes, that was a factor.
Yeah.
Okay. Licenses and permits, the full year estimate is 2.8 million. That is 0.3 million above budget and a full 0.9 million above last year's actuals. This revenue is very subject to the timing of development projects. So when the projects go in and they're paying all these fees, then the revenue tends to pour in. When the economy slows down, construction stops, then those licenses and permits likewise slow down. And charges for service, the full year estimate is 5.1 million, which is 0.5 million below budget, but still 1.8 million above last year's actuals. The same thing, this revenue is subject to the timing of development projects, as well as recreation programs that are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and registrations significantly lowered or completely canceled. So we do hope that this will be coming back soon. And then if you look, here's a table. I would, to the left here is the different type of revenue. I would kind of draw your attention to these columns here, this annual 2021 year-end estimate. Here's the $53.3 million number on the revenue side that the city is projecting. That's against a $55 million budget, a $1.6, $1.7 million shortfall. And that's against a 47.2 actual million actuals for last fiscal year. So we'll take a look at the general fund expenditure side. Same thing. This is a kind of a duplicated slide, except now on the revenue or the expenditure side. Last fiscal year, the first 6 months, the city spent 21.4 million. The first 6 months of the current fiscal year, we've spent 23.0 million. Last fiscal year, we ended the year with 48.3 million in general fund expenditures. We are projecting 53.8 million in expenditures this fiscal year, and that is short of our $55 million budget. So, this is a slide basically just referring to what I just mentioned. Expenditures at mid-year were 23 million. That's 1.6 million or 7.3% higher than the first 6 months of last year. The reasons for this, this increase is reflected by higher salary and benefit costs, service contracts, and simply just an increasing economic recovery. There's more activity out there. I think our service levels have raised slightly compared to where they were a year ago. And those expenditures were offset by 14 vacant funded positions.
And also, is that inflation, is that playing any?
Sure, good point. That's a good point, right? The inflation is certainly driving up things like service contracts and other supplies and materials and services that the city would need to purchase. So full year expenditures, we are projecting expenditure total of 53.8 million. That is 1.2 million or 2.2% below budget. And again, those savings are reflected mostly in position vacancy savings. We are projecting a 5.5 million above last year's actuals of 48.3, and that is equivalent to 11.4% increase. And then you'll see that every department is projected to end the fiscal year at or below budget. That is a good thing, and here they are.
So is that just because of the vacant positions, or are we having to impact any service levels?
We are not impacting any service levels. So I think we're still providing, to the extent that we can, if there, for instance, programs in recreation or other areas that had to be canceled or curtailed because of COVID-19, in that regard, then yes, there would be a lower service level, but we have not lessened any services. And Joe, city manager, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's accurate. So there were no budgetary impacts to service levels, other impacts beyond our controls, the pandemic and other things. Obviously, we have no control, but we tighten our belts. And as you were aware, our last budget process, we were very kind of wary about the TOT, maybe not fully making a comeback. And so all the department heads were very, very conscious about that and very strategic in their expenditures to ensure that we could, kind of close that gap in expenditures because of the revenue loss or the unexpected revenue. So that's where you end up with what we have here. So that is position savings, but it is also some strategic spending or not spending, if you will. And that will continue throughout the year to continue to kind of manage the shortfall on the TOT, primarily revenue side, but also the community services, parks and community services. I'm actually hopeful because now we're coming into the start of some pretty big programming time for Parks and Community Services, and we have Wind Festival, and so we have a lot of pretty great things coming up that hopefully will not be impacted by anything with the pandemic, and we should, if we're lucky, see some positive revenue coming in on that.
Thanks.
Okay, so back to this table, expenditures by department. Again, here is our year-end projection of 53.8 million in general fund expenditures against a budget of 55 million. That is a difference of 1.2 million under budget, and 48.3 million is what we spent in last year's actuals. Each department here on the difference, you'll see that each department is either at budget or below budget. So each department is in good position. This slide is a little bit complex, so let's take a minute to discuss this. This is how we calculate where we stand in terms of the city's 36% policy reserve level. At the beginning of the fiscal year, we started the year with a reserve beginning fund balance of 19.2 million and against a budget of 19.2 million. We're bringing in revenues of 53.3, offset by expenditures of 53.8, in addition to transfers out of the general fund of 2.2 million. So here's that net increase in fund balance of 1.7 million. So you take 19.2 plus the 1.7, and you end up with a general fund year-end funding balance of 20.9 million. And then this column over here is the budgeted numbers. Now, when we calculate that policy reserve level, it is that is the equivalent of 41%, and we calculate it based on the prior fiscal year's audited general fund expenditures plus the transfer to the Doherty Valley Fund. And so at 41%, we are exceeding our policy minimums by over 5%.
So is this net transfers out is to Doherty Valley Fund?
A significant portion is to Doherty Valley Fund, but there's all kinds of transfers in and transfers out that happen. Transfers out might be to debt service fund, to other expenses, CIP projects. So there's a lot of in and out happening, but certainly it does include a large chunk of Doherty Valley.
I forgot about debt service. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So here is all city expenditures by category. This is the different ways that the city spends money: personnel services, contract services, materials and supplies, other costs, capital outlay, that's capital that we spend from our operating budgets, and then capital improvement projects, capital improvement program, CIP, and debt service. So here is the year-end estimate. All funds, again, this is all funds. We're projected to spend 123.7 million on an all funds basis against our budget of 125.1 million. So we are under budget by 1.4 million. Let's take a look just for a minute at the Doherty Valley Fund in particular. So Doherty Valley revenue is projected to come in at 500,000 over budget. The full year estimate is 21.3 million. And that is a full 2.3 million over last year's actuals. The rate of home sales and timing of reimbursements from the county impacts the collection of these tax revenues. Now, because it's, the county is involved, we don't just get property taxes coming straight to the city from the county auditor's office. What we get instead is that special assessment that comes that residents pay into, and then the county passes forward to us. So there is a timing issue there. On the expenditure side, we are projected to come in at 2 million below budget. The full fiscal year estimate is 22.7 million. This is 2.3 million above last year's actuals. And some of the reason for that is increases in service contracts, utility costs, and annexations, and this is offset by decreases in position vacancies.
So has that revenue gone up because of any of the annexation? Does it impact us getting those dollars or not really?
It should impact. I'm not sure of the timing. Candace, are you able to help answer that one? I'm not sure of the timing of when those, did we get any new annexation, new properties into the city?
I'm not sure of the timing of the annexations either. I don't know the answer to that. Normally we get the information, I think, from the planning division, but I don't know the timings that the new properties come on board.
I thought last November is when we got everybody into the city, or maybe early this year.
I remember stating that, yes, all of the proposed annexations had been completed.
Debbie Chamberlain, do you have any information on this?
Regarding the annexations that are pending?
Yeah, or the last annexation?
Oh,
Yes.
hold on. There we go. I'm sorry. One more time on the question. I apologize.
I was just asking that when was the last annexation? And I think we're right, annexation is complete now, or if all
Yes, I apologize. Yes, all the Doherty Valley annexations are complete now. They were completed in, I believe, 2020.
So we would be receiving the property tax revenue from all the annexations now.
Looks like May 2020, somewhere around that. We completed all annexations in Doherty Valley. So now this 0.5, that could be even because of the property tax increases, right? Because the new home sale values that maybe add additional revenue.
Yeah, so I guess my question was that those houses were there, they were not just annexed. So do we get more once they're annexed, or it doesn't really impact?
We receive property tax once they're annexed.
Okay, and before that we don't. Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Actually, the property tax comes in once they're occupied and sold. So we may have, and construction is nearly complete in Doherty Valley. We do have the Village Center as the remaining 185 apartments left to be constructed. But so occupancy kicks in the property tax payments because the transfer to the new homeowner.
Okay, so annexation really wouldn't impact it, because if they were occupied before the annexation, we're still getting those taxes? Because
through this, what we get through the CFD, and then upon transfer to the city, we get the additional property tax. I believe is how the agreement is structured. I'm not 100% on that. Kelly, do you remember from the agreement?
Not the details, just generally how it works. It's it's a complicated
Yeah, I
formula.
know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was trying to understand as well, like if any of this is tied to annexation or annexation is just a process of bringing them, or, and I know it's a complicated agreement we have there, so we can discuss this later, but yeah, I was trying to get an idea if any of that annexation has any impact on these, so it may or may not.
Annexation does have an impact.
Okay,
It does roll, the property tax rolls onto San Ramon's property tax, but as you're aware with the settlement agreement, San Ramon doesn't receive the full share. There's a property tax sharing agreement in Doherty Valley as well as different assessments that were part of the settlement agreement. But once San Ramon annexes and it moves on to the San Ramon property tax rolls, it kicks in the property tax agreement.
yeah. And my understanding is right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were to go into the corporate world, you kind of submit your expenditure and then the company reimburses you. So that's kind of how we get reimbursed by the county.
Yeah.
All those.
Yeah, it's you simplified it well. There's a formula that accounts for sales tax and vehicle license fee and other things, and we get a certain percentage that we have to apply, and then we receive the remaining assessment, which is always now, since everything's annexed, we receive all of the funds collected in the county service area under the M29. So that's a simplified version of it. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. When people start calculating how much tax they're paying and they're like, that's all we're getting, I'm like, yeah, it's all formula based, and
yes,
that's my most simplified explanation of how we get it back.
Yeah, it's complex. We're trying to simplify it even more, but it's pretty challenging.
If I remember right, we get like around 1.2% or something, or 1.5 because when residents think that, most of the residents think that they are paying all their property tax to city, but they are not, right? So
no, it's a shared agreement, and
much later.
multiple agencies, including the county, get some.
Yep.
Okay. So now that we've kind of looked at where we stand, what our projections are on the revenue and the expenditure side for the current fiscal year, we did get several requests for budget adjustments that the city manager has reviewed, and we are making some recommendations to make adjustments to various funds, including $348,487 in the general fund. All of these were included in the written report, so we'll run through them pretty quickly. Citywide electric vehicle charging stations, $210,000. Funding for vehicle and equipment fuel due to increased costs and usage, $36,000. We've all felt that at the pump as we've gone to fill our cars recently. Funding for janitorial services at the San Ramon Olympic Pool, Doherty Station Community Center, and Doherty Station Library of $19,857. And that's because of renovation projects that were delayed. And so now we need to put the funding for janitorial services back into the budget. City Council just recently approved the funding for the fence removal at San Ramon Golf Course at $39,000, or at least they discussed it. Funding is included for a new administrative coordinator position in the city attorney's office, and this position would handle all of the contract related functions in the city, and would also assist with some administrative duties in the city attorney's office and the city clerk's office, $43,608. This also there's no additional funding needed, but this budget request includes reclassification of a senior administrative analyst position in the finance division, upgraded to a program manager position. So over time, this position has become increasingly, has been responsible for increasingly complex financial functions. And in addition, due to the recent Finance Division reorganization, there were 3 direct reports that were assigned to this position. So again, no additional funding is needed here.
So the first one, sorry, the first one, funding for CIP for electric vehicle charging. I thought for some reason we got grants on that, and we're going to use that funds.
We do get grants, but the grant funding itself was not very significant. I want to say is about 45,000. Does that sound about right, Maria?
Yes, that's correct. Good afternoon. So the amount of the grant was 44,000. So the remaining amount of 210,000 was a commitment by the city council when you approved the funding agreement, and the 511 Contra Costa will also contribute the local match portion of it.
Yeah, thanks, Maria.
You're welcome.
Okay, so those are all the impacts or the recommended adjustments that would impact general fund. There's other fund appropriations that are also recommended, 709,166 in expenditures, and then another 66,823 in revenue appropriations. So under the heading of just various funds, there's been a request for additional budget to offset increasing water usage and costs, totaling 18,400. And that's at Old Ranch Estates, Village Parkway, Old Ranch Summit, and Henry Ranch. Also, $190,013 is requested to basically backfill various funds for the cost of auto accident repairs. Hopefully, much, if not all of this money can be recovered through insurance recoveries, but it includes $6,840 to the Citywide Landscape Fund, $53,421 to Citywide Lighting Fund, and $129,752 to the Doherty Valley Fund. Also, funding is requested for a new maintenance technician 1-2 who would be working on roadway and flood control program. The funding for that is split between 2 funds, the Citywide Lighting Fund for $35,197 and NPDS Stormwater Fund for $4,170. And of course, this is, we're just a reminder that we're talking about just the current fiscal year. So this would be the cost that would be added to the current fiscal year budget. And then there would be the new cost of the position for the next fiscal year would be baked into the budget request for next year.
And these are beyond the currently vacant positions we have, right?
Correct. These are new positions. When we're talking about adding positions, they're new positions, new FTE to the city. This next one, however, is not a new position. It's a reclassification of an existing maintenance technician 2. The reclassification or upgrade would be to a maintenance coordinator position, and that person would be overseeing the utility crew and trail maintenance responsibilities. There is sufficient funding in the department so that no additional funding is needed in the current fiscal year. For the Henry Ranch Fund, emergency tree removal of $2,000. For the Bent Creek Fund, emergency tree pruning of $10,000 is requested. And then we have some additional requests for Doherty Valley Fund. This is a little bit tricky here to understand. From kind of an accounting perspective, at the end of the fiscal year, the city general fund backfills all of the Doherty Valley Fund. There's a reconciliation, and the Doherty Valley Fund is made whole so that it ends the year at zero fund balance. And so these requests, although they are through the Doherty Valley Fund, they will actually hit general fund reserves. There is no Doherty Valley Fund reserve balance because it, like I said, it nets to zero at the end of the fiscal year. So the Doherty Valley Fund is requesting additional janitorial services at the San Ramon Olympic Pool and Doherty Station Community Center and Doherty Station Library. That's an additional $23,670. Again, that would hit general fund reserves. Funding to repair inoperable streetlights that was caused by a wire theft. That total cost is $89,530. And funding to treat some trees in the Doherty Valley area for aphids at $40,000.
So what is a wire theft? Like, are we responsible for it? Is PG&E responsible for it? What happened there?
We are responsible if we own the streetlights. And so this is somebody coming in the night or something and clipping the wires and pulling copper straight out of the ground so they can go sell it on a secondary market.
My God.
Yeah. What it's pennies on the dollar compared to what they sell that for.
And are we going to get this money back from CSA, or it's just our general fund that we have to spend?
Just the general fund. Well, is that true, Candace?
Well, when we submit the invoice for reimbursement, we'll get it back in that respect from the county.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Going from
our expenditures would make us eligible to receive reimbursement for it. Whether or not we actually get additional revenue for it is another question, correct, Candace?
Right, so the revenue received is considered somewhat of a reimbursement in the respect that we have to submit the expenditures to the county in order for them to release payment. So we have to prove we spent a certain amount of money in order to get the property tax revenue.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Moving on to the solid waste fund. The solid waste program is requesting recyclist software to comply with SB 1383 reporting requirements. That is a total of $36,410. To the Village Parkway Fund, funding for tree pruning due to storm damage in trees with poor and hazardous structures, $1,500.
So is that solid waste fund, is it part of ACI that we are going to give it to them, or how that works? Solid waste fund.
Well, I see Maria jumped in, so I'll let Maria answer that one.
This is coming from the solid waste fund that the city controls. So ACI does not. This is going to come directly to us, so we can use this software to do the compliance for SB 1833 or 1383.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Maria.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving on now to CIP funding. Funding for the infrastructure maintenance fund for the Bollinger Canyon Fountain. They need to replace the butterfly valve. That is a total of $8,276. Funding is requested for the infrastructure maintenance fund for HVAC duct cleaning at a cost of $50,000. Funding for the from the infrastructure maintenance fund for citywide parks and amenities, $200,000. And again, each of these sources, they have their own fund to cover these expenses. We're not talking about general fund dollars here.
How much money is in the infrastructure fund right now?
Let's see.
I can check.
Yeah. Janice,
The
would you mind?
amount is 446,000.
Thank you, Maria.
And then the proposal is to remove $413,212 from the Park Development Fund for citywide parks and amenities. Also remove funding from the Park Development Program for an irrigation booster pump installation.
So the remove means we are not adding the fund, or we are taking out the fund to do that work?
Taking away, right. So this funding already exists in this CIP project for citywide parks and amenities, and also for this park development fund. The funding is there to do these projects, but it is not needed at this time. So that funding would be removed from those particular projects.
Oh,
So if I may expand on that a little bit more, the Park Development Fund is funded by the developer mitigation fees. And because of either the funds that we are deferring or the projects have been delayed, the funding that we thought we would be getting at the beginning of this fiscal year, they aren't coming in. So these projects that are funded by the Park Development Fund, we had to reduce those projects and just address the highest priority items for these particular CIPs. That is why you're seeing the credits back to the Park Development Fund. And what that does is it makes the Park Development Fund whole with really only $500 left in the Park Development Fund. So that is the reason why there's a credit. And that is also the reason why we're requesting $200,000 from the Infrastructure Maintenance Fund to go to the parks projects, so we can make sure that we're addressing the highest priority items.
sounds good. Thank you.
Were those expected, is it delayed because of FullYear or any other projects as well?
It's related to Aspenwood and Rome Development.
Okay.
We had different projections at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Got it.
Okay, and then lastly on this slide is also another $44,448 reduction, remove funding from the Park Development Fund for a shade structure. On for CIP project funding on the revenue side, Maria did mention earlier grant funding that would come in for electric vehicle charging stations. That is $44,000 from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Transportation Fund for Clean Air, and also another $22,823 from 511 Contra Costa Measure J commute alternate funds. And then lastly, the city, as you know, participates in the PERS retirement program. The retirement program is requiring basically what ends up being a deposit, a $500,000 deposit to pay for benefits for retirees when there is not enough money to cover the entire cost of those benefits. So we just have money in an account with PERS so that they can draw from that. This $500,000 request would come from the city's PARS Pension Rate Stabilization Trust. So that's the funding set aside for pension benefits. It would not impact the general fund. So if we take a quick look forward to what fiscal year 22-23 holds for us, some of the key budget development drivers, we want to be strategic in how we plan for recovery from the pandemic. One of those ways, one of those things to think about is revenue recovery. If you recall, we have a general fund balance net increase of $1.7 million. But in order to get there, we had to use our 4.05 million in ARPA funding. So between that 4.05 million and the $1.7 million increase to general fund balance, there's a revenue gap of 2.4 million. We have to make sure that we're aware of that. We remember it, and we try to figure out ways to mitigate that gap. Of course, there are always rising costs of employee benefits and inflationary costs that get added into the budget. We are striving in every way possible to maintain our service levels under these significant resource constraints. And so some of the strategies that we may be looking at to reduce the burden on the general fund, in the same way that we are using the PARS Pension Stabilization Trust to make that $500,000 PERS benefit payment. Perhaps we look at the trust fund for making our ongoing PERS normal cost expenditures from there, so it doesn't hit the general fund. And then, as also mentioned earlier, we are currently at 41% at our reserve level for the general fund. The fund policy is 36%, so maybe we want to reduce that funding down to the 36% level and just make sure that we're using all of our available resources to help close the budget. So what are some of the conclusions that we can draw from all of this? The general fund beginning balance is higher than what we had previously estimated it would be, and that's due to better than anticipated prior year ending results. So we ended fiscal year 21 better than what we thought. We have been very careful in our expenditure monitoring over the past 6 months, and we are experiencing salary savings from position vacancies. Our general fund revenue is $1.6 million below our budget at this point, but we're also projecting that our general fund expenditures are going to be 1.2 million below budget. So there's a discrepancy there of 400,000. Our projected year-end policy reserves are 20.9 million, 41% of fund balance. Now, if the council chooses to approve the 300,000 in general fund mid-year requests, all of those additional budget adjustments that we just reviewed, then our projected year-end reserves would drop to 20.5 million, which is a 40% reserve level. And the remaining 700,000 in mid-year requests, other than general fund sources, are funded by all of those other dedicated revenues, so they do not hit the general fund. So that is the end of the presentation. Are there any other questions that we can answer at this point?
I don't have a question, but sorry.
Sorry, go ahead if you have any questions.
Yeah, not a question, but just wanted to make a comment, right? There was a reason we set that 36% policy, because we, believed we can sustain and take the risk of. So for me, it's, our policy is 36%. We're still higher than our policy. So that is certainly an option I would recommend the council explore as well. The other question I had was that, what if in the next 6 months we were to fully fund those positions, 14 positions? How much more would we need or to close that gap? Do we have any idea? Or maybe bring it when you bring it to council, something we might want to include in there?
Yeah, that's something that we'd have to calculate out to see what that additional expense would be. But what I can say is that those vacant positions are budgeted. And to the extent that we know what that cost is going to be when those positions will be filled, then those additional expenses were added into the projected year-end expenditures.
Got it.
But I just wanted to mention that if all those were filled, we would be coming in at budget pretty much, unless there were savings in other areas like contracts or anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh, you want to stop sharing the screen? So
Yeah, please.
You don't want to look at any more numbers?
Okay, with that, we'll open public comment. Public comment is open now. To comment, please click the raise your hand button or *9 on your telephone to request to speak. When it is your turn, you will be unmuted to make your comment for up to 3 minutes. Let me see if we have any hands up. Okay, I see call in user 2. So let's bring call in user 2. Yeah, call in user 2, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I just want to give my 2 pennies. I feel that when all departments have submitted their budgets and our expenditure budget does not congruent to our revenue, then there has to be a policy guideline for the finance department staff to know which department to give our budget to with priorities. And I feel that this needs to be looked at by policies. For example, council members of FAR mentioned a couple of perhaps her pet preferences for spending at the beginning of the meeting, but those expenditures don't really benefit our citizens. And yet we're the ones who are paying property taxes, and it is our businesses that are paying taxes. It is not fair. I feel that priorities should be given to these areas. Maintain or improve quality of life for residents and business of San Ramon. Maintenance and beautification of our city infrastructures. If we don't keep up, in 10 years, San Ramon will look like Fremont, if that's what you want. But that's not what I want. And also, revenue generation should be responsible. So then, therefore, we must keep an eye on expenditures, and therefore, it cycles back to what I said. We need to have policies that guide priorities when, you know, there are too many monks to fight for the same bucket of water. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment? I don't see any other public comments, so I'm closing the public comment now. Okay, with that, Vice Chair Jaffer, any further discussion or comments, feedback?
Yeah, just my comment is, so at the beginning of the call, I was looking at the California budget and what might be as part of that budget, what money might be able to, the cities might be able to get that. I can't personally set priorities for where we spend this budget. We actually do set these priorities as the larger city council, and we will be setting those priorities in a meeting on March 26th as a joint city council as to where the city money and budget will be going. So just want to make sure there is a process to how we set our priorities. I want to thank Kelly for presenting, doing an excellent job of really presenting the mid-year budget, very detailed, very thorough. And just want to say thank you to Joe again for, I mean, with all the little money we have, making sure that our service levels are still met and we are delivering and, making the city beautiful by the day, and, really managing a budget. We probably in the Tri-Valley, we have the smallest number of revenue, and yet we are doing an amazing job of, making sure we are serving our residents. So thank you again for presenting a well-balanced budget, and, again, we recommend that this move to the larger council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Kelly, for presentation and for your team working hard and putting these numbers so that we can all make sure that we present a good balanced budget. And I want to really special thanks to every one of department heads and city leader Joe for keeping the vacancies, position vacancies open for the savings. And at the same time, you are working hard to make sure the service levels are not depreciated. As a people's manager myself, I know how challenging it is to keep the positions not hiring and saving while continue to provide these quality services. I really appreciate each and every one of department heads for that. And coming to the point on that strategic pandemic recovery. So as Vice Chair Jaffer mentioned, we are looking forward for our goal setting meeting where we are going to work and see what are our priorities. And we definitely going to look at holistic way of how we can make sure allocate or how we can bring more revenue, because as I'm seeing right now, I know you are really working hard to keep this budget tight and balanced, and on top of it you're showing the reserves. But then with going forward, I'm sure we are going to get much more challenging, right? So because especially the inflation rate, that's the way it's going on. And also you see already in Bay Area, many cities, they're already working towards homeless or affordable housing or homeless housing. All those things are coming up. If you see even our neighboring cities, they started working on it. So we still don't have those. So those requirements may come up into our city pretty soon. So in order to prepare ready, that those will be much more bigger challenges that we may be facing. So we can definitely address those, and we should keep that in mind for our future budgets. And also one more thing is a really disappointing thing is ARPA funds. We were expecting such a good around 14 million, but then we got into 8.1. So is it I just have one question regarding, is it possible, before I say that, if I remember right, Towns Consulting is the team that helped us to get that or worked with our city, right? So is it possible for bringing them onto our city council meeting so that they can present what happened, why we got this reduction? That will be great if we can bring them on the city council so that they can get the answers. And otherwise, yeah, thanks once again for great presentation and all your great work in keeping our budget in balance.
Thank you. And I'll give a quick shout out to Candace Daniels and Vivian Gong, who did the lion's share of this work in putting the presentation together. Chair Veros, in reply to your question or your comment on the ARPA funding, the ARPA funding was really set at a federal level using complex formulas that were used before for other programs, like I think it was a CDBG grant funding mechanisms. And so we could certainly bring in the Townsend people to talk about other grants and federal revenue sources. I don't think, I mean, they could maybe give us some background as to how the ARPA funding was developed, but I don't think that any consultants or lobbyists were really involved in the setting of those funds and how that distribution was made.
Okay, so just to make sure that City Council get their answers during the meeting, it would be nice to have them if possible. So
Okay.
that, yeah, not only about ARPA, but any other funds questions that comes up, because right now it's all about a post-COVID now. We definitely let's put together all our heads to see how strategically we can come out of this pandemic recovery with strong so that we can build better future for our revenues. Because every time when we are going for any basic services, it is getting quite challenging on allocation, funding, and all that. And I'm sure we are looking forward for our goal setting meeting to see how we can increase these revenues.
And we can have if you prefer to, that might be a good appropriate forum for just a quick explanation discussion on how those ARPA funds were distributed. As Kelly mentioned, it is complex, and we did come in with the expectation, the initial calculation. I think the League of Cities did that for the cities, and it came in as you mentioned, probably $4 million higher than what we actually received. And so that was just an adjustment to the formula that when they did the calculations. But I think that would be, we can agendize that on the goal setting date and have a short discussion on that to just give you clarification to the extent possible, because some of those formulas, as Kelly said, are very complex, and hopefully we get it to where it's easily understandable.
That sounds good, Joe. Thank you.
If I can add one more thing, Kelly, I mentioned if we can factor in the economic outlook, the capital markets, if possible, and maybe not now, but in the future, and see if that does have an impact on our economic outlook as well. It would be good to see.
I'll just add in there as well, during our updates with our own investments that Candace gives, we monitor so that the economic outlook is a factor in, because we receive revenue off of those investments as well. So Candace and her team and our contractors who do that, who's that?
FHN Financial.
Thank you. They are constantly monitoring it. So it absolutely is a factor for us as well when we take a look at this.
Sounds good. Any other conversations, questions? Vice Chair Jaffer.
Are we meeting on the 7th as well? Or, yeah.
Right, that will be a regular meeting.
Okay, so if we don't have any further questions, we can adjourn the call. Thank you, everyone.